The mining colony on 442B had been quiet for 3 years. Nothing bad happened. Nothing dangerous came close. The people who lived there worked hard every day, digging for minerals deep below the rocky ground. Dr. Lewis was the head scientist. She looked at rocks and dirt all day long, taking notes and making maps of what was under the colony. Her job was important because the minerals they found were valuable to traders across space. Had a daughter named Emma. Emma was 6 years old and had red hair like her mother. The girl spent her days in the big plastic dome where people lived. She drew pictures with colored markers of the strange rocks and mountains she saw outside. Emma was not like other children her age. She did not complain about being so far from Earth. She did not miss green trees or oceans. The colony was her home, and she loved it there. The colony itself sat on a wide, flat plain surrounded by tall, rocky cliffs. The main dome was enormous, holding living spaces, work areas, medical rooms, and storage. Around it were smaller domes connected by metal tubes. Everything was built to keep people safe from the thin air outside. The temperature dropped to dangerous levels at night. The dust storms could come without warning and blow hard enough to break windows. Everything about 442B was harsh, but humans had learned to live there. The colony had only 42 people. This made it small compared to other outposts. Everyone knew everyone else. The workers ate together in the common hall. The doctors knew all the children. The engineers fixed things that broke and helped people stay alive in this hard place. It was like a big family living together far from home. Commander Gregory Hayes ran the military part of the colony. He was a tall man with black hair and a serious face. He did not smile very often. Gregory had spent 20 years in the space military. He had fought in small conflicts and worked on ships that traveled between stars. When he came to 442B, many people wondered why such an important soldier would stay at such a small, peaceful colony. Gregory never explained his reasons. He simply did his job and watched the skies above. That particular afternoon was like every other afternoon. Was in the laboratory studying rock samples from the South Valley. Emma was in the living area making her drawings. The colony workers were digging, fixing machines, and doing their daily tasks. The sun was setting, and the sky turned orange and red over the cliffs. Then the scanners started making noise. The long-range detection system had picked up something far away. The alarm was not loud or angry, just a steady beeping sound. The person watching the scanners was a young man named. He stared at his screen with confused eyes. He checked the readings again. Then he moved his hand across the controls and checked one more time. "Command, we have something on the long-range system," said into the radio. "Multiple signals, large ones, they are moving toward us." Gregory Hayes heard the message while he was eating dinner. He stood up immediately and left his food on the table. He walked quickly to the command center without running. Running would cause panic. People watched him move through the corridors, and they could tell something was wrong. When Gregory reached the scanner room, showed him everything. 5 ships were coming from the outer parts of the star system. They were moving fast. The size of the ships was huge. The computers said they were warships. They were a species that nobody wanted to meet. They were not like humans at all. They had bodies made of crystal. They were very strong and very military. The culture believed in taking what they wanted. When they found something they needed, they took it. If other people lived there, those people had to leave. They did not negotiate. They did not make deals. They gave orders and expected obedience. Gregory's jaw became tight. He had heard stories about encounters. Some colonies escaped and fled. Some colonies fought and lost. No colony had ever fought and won. They always took what they wanted. "How long until they reach us?" Gregory asked. 20 hours, said. "Maybe less if they increase speed." Gregory immediately called for a full colony emergency meeting. Within 30 minutes, all 42 people were gathered in the main meeting room. People stood close together because there was not much space. Some people held children. Some people looked worried. Some people tried to look calm but failed. Was there with Emma. Emma held her mother's hand and looked around the room. She did not understand why everyone looked scared, but she knew that something bad was happening. Gregory stood in front of the group. He told them about the ships. He told them about the problem. "The transmission came through 2 minutes ago," Gregory said. His voice did not shake. "They say we are on land they want. The minerals below our colony are valuable to them. They want us to leave within 24 hours. If we do not leave, they will take the colony by force." The room became very quiet. People looked at each other. A woman named Kate asked the important question. Can we leave? Is there transport available? Gregory's face showed the answer before his words did. The transport ship in orbit was supposed to complete repairs this week, Gregory said. 2 hours ago, all communications with the ship stopped. We cannot reach anyone up there. We cannot send signals. We cannot receive signals. Someone has disabled our systems. People started talking at the same time. Voices became loud and scared. Children started crying because they felt the fear from the adults, pulled Emma close and held her tight. Gregory raised his hand. Quiet. We need to think clearly. We have 20 hours before they arrive. We need to decide what we do next. That night sat with Emma in their small living quarters. The room was not big. There was a bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out at the dark landscape. Emma had questions. Mommy, what are the crystal people? Emma asked. Sat on the edge of the bed and brushed Emma's red hair back from her face. They are beings from far away, said. They are different from us. They have bodies made from crystal instead of skin and bones. Are they bad? Emma asked. Thought about how to answer. She could lie and say no. She could try to make Emma feel better, but believed that children understood the truth even when people tried to hide it. She decided to tell Emma something real. They think differently than we do, said. They believe in taking what they want. They believe humans are not important. They do not think we have value, but I believe something different. I believe that humans are stronger than they think. I believe that we do not give up easily. And I believe that when something matters enough, we stand and fight. Emma looked at her mother with serious eyes. Will they hurt us? Pulled her daughter close and kissed her head. Not if I can help it, whispered. Not while I am alive. Emma went to sleep holding her mother's hand. Stayed awake, thinking. She thought about her past. She thought about the years she had spent in the military before becoming a scientist. She thought about the training she had received and the lessons she had learned. She was not just a geologist. She was a person who had fought before. She was someone who understood strategy and survival. And now she had something that made her more dangerous than any soldier. She had a daughter to protect. Got up quietly and left the room. She went to find Gregory Hayes. She needed to talk to him about something. She needed to talk about a plan that seemed impossible but might be their only chance. The ships landed at sunrise. 5 massive vessels came down from the sky and touched the ground in a perfect circle around the colony. They were not beautiful. They were not designed to look impressive. They were designed to work. Each ship was as tall as a 20-story building. They were made of metal that looked cold and hard. They did not care about beauty. They cared about power. Soldiers began to come out from the ships. They were not like anything humans had ever evolved to fight. They were 3 meters tall, made entirely of crystal that reflected light in strange ways. Their bodies were not soft. They did not have skin that could be cut. They had hard surfaces that looked like blue diamonds catching the sun. Their eyes were black and empty. When they looked at humans, there was no emotion. There was only the cold judgment of a calculator deciding if something was useful or not useful. The commander was called Prime Authority 6. This was the closest thing humans had to understanding the rank structure. Pack 6 was even taller than the soldiers. Its crystal body was darker, almost black. When Pack 6 moved, other moved with it. There was no discussion. There was no question. Hierarchy was absolute. Pack 6 set up a command post outside the main dome. The crystal being stood there, absolutely still, watching the colony. Its black eyes did not blink. Its massive body blocked out the sun. Around Pack 6, the soldiers took positions. They had weapons. These weapons looked like nothing humans made. They used technology that humans did not fully understand. The weapons could burn, explode, or create waves of energy that destroyed whatever they hit. Watched from inside the dome with the other colonists. Everyone was afraid, real fear. The kind of fear that makes your heart beat very fast and makes it hard to think straight. Children cried. Some adults cried too. Everyone understood that they were facing an enemy they could not defeat. Gregory made contact with Pack 6 through the radio. His voice was calm and professional, the voice of a military man who has faced difficult situations before. This is Colony Commander Gregory Hayes, he said into the radio. We received your message. We understand you want us to leave. We are ready to discuss evacuation procedures. For several minutes there was no response. They did not seem to move at all. They were so still that some people wondered if they were machines instead of living creatures. Then Pack 6 answered. The voice came through the speakers. It was not a kind voice. It was not friendly. It was empty of all emotion, like a computer talking. "Evacuation will begin immediately," Pack 6 said. "All humans will gather in the center dome for transport to your orbital vessel. You have 2 hours. Any human not at the gathering point will be executed. All colony equipment, records, and materials will be left for mining operations. Humans will take only personal items. Do you understand?" Gregory answered yes, though everyone knew they could not really do what Pack 6 demanded. They could not reach the orbital ship. They did not know what had happened to the people up there. Over the next hour, the colonists moved in slow circles, trying to decide what to do. Some people packed bags with personal belongings. Some people stood frozen, unable to move or think. Children held their parents and asked questions that nobody could answer. Found Joseph Washington in the engineering section. Joseph was a smart man with dark skin and quick hands. He could fix anything. He could understand machines that other people found impossible. "We need to know about the mining tunnels," said to him. "The deep ones, the ones that go far underground." Joseph looked at her with understanding. He did not ask why. He simply nodded and pulled up maps on his computer. The colony had dug tunnels hundreds of meters below the surface, following the mineral deposits down into the earth. These tunnels were connected to the main dome by elevators and access shafts. "The crystal structure below is unstable in some places," Joseph explained, pointing to the map. "That is why we reinforced those sections. The rock formation is beautiful but fragile. If you put too much pressure on the wrong spot, the whole thing could break." "Could we cause that breakdown on purpose?" asked. "Could we trigger a collapse that would not hurt people but would make the ground unstable?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment. Then he understood what was thinking. "You want to make it impossible for them to use the ground here," Joseph said. "You want to create a situation where they cannot harvest the minerals." "Yes," said simply. Joseph moved his hands across the keyboard. He pulled up more maps. He looked at the structural data. Minutes passed. Then he looked at. "It is possible," Joseph said. "If we place charges in the right locations and trigger them in the right sequence, we can cause secondary collapses throughout the tunnel system. It would take hours for the ground to fully settle. And yes, if they try to dig anywhere near the collapse zones, they could lose equipment and soldiers." Felt something hard form in her chest. This was possible. They might have a chance. But there was more to it than just geology. There was psychology. There was understanding how an enemy thinks and using that thinking against them. When to find Emma, she found her daughter in a small side room where several children were being watched by a teacher. Emma was sitting quietly, holding a stuffed rabbit toy that she had brought from Earth. Took Emma to a private place and held her hand. "Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave now," said. "I need you to do exactly what I tell you to do. Can you do that?" Emma nodded. The girl was young, but she understood something was wrong. "I am going to take you to a special place underground," explained. "It is very safe. You will stay there with some other people. You will have food and water. You will have supplies. And I need you to stay there quiet and hidden until I come to get you. Do you understand?" "Are you coming with me?" Emma asked. "Not right away," said. "But I will come, I promise, and I need you to be the bravest girl in the whole colony. Can you do that for me?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry out loud. "Yes, Mommy," Emma said. Held her daughter for a long time. She thought about all the times humans had faced impossible situations. She thought about her own ancestors who had survived ice ages and dangers. She thought about the strength that came from the need to protect someone you loved more than your own life. As the 2-hour deadline approached, Pack 6 made a transmission. "Time for evacuation begins now," the empty voice said. "Gather at the center dome. Humans will be transported in groups." And Gregory made a decision together. They would follow the order. They would gather people in the center dome, but they would move slowly. They would ask for clarifications. They would create delays and confusion. Every minute that they focused on the evacuation was a minute they were not looking at what was happening underground. Joseph Washington was already placing charges in the deepest tunnels. His team worked in absolute silence, placing explosives in the locations they had selected. They marked everything carefully. They knew exactly when to trigger each charge and in what order. Emma was taken to the deepest shelter, a reinforced room that had been built for emergency situations. She went with several colonists who would protect her and keep her safe. Before she went, Emma hugged her mother one more time. Remember, whispered, you are the bravest girl I know, and I am coming back for you. As the sun set on 442B, the colonists began moving to the center dome. They moved slowly, asking questions, asking for help carrying things. They stalled and delayed. The soldiers watched with empty black eyes. They did not seem to understand that humans were being difficult on purpose. They simply waited. They had all the time in the world. They had all the power. But what they did not understand was that humans had something else. Humans had creativity. Humans had the ability to change plans in the middle of danger. Humans had the desperate courage that comes from knowing that your child's life depends on your willingness to face the impossible. Under the ground, far below where they stood, Joseph Washington's team finished placing the last charges. Everything was ready. Stood at the center dome and looked out at the crystal soldiers. They did not scare her now. They made her angry. They made her determined. She thought about something she had heard as a child, a story about a small animal called a honey badger. The honey badger was one of the smallest predators in Africa. When something threatened it, the honey badger did not run. It did not hide. It turned to face its enemy, bared its teeth, and growled. Despite being much smaller and weaker, the honey badger had a reputation as one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. Nothing wanted to fight a cornered honey badger. The evacuation was supposed to happen fast. It did not. Every colonist moved slowly. One woman asked for help carrying boxes. Another man needed a few minutes to gather medical records. A child could not find her shoes. Another person needed water before traveling. The delays were small, but they added up. Pack 6 did not show anger. The leader simply waited. It stood outside the dome, its crystal body catching the light of the setting sun. Waiting was not difficult for a being made of crystal. Patience was not something struggled with. But in the tunnels far below, Joseph Washington's team was working with urgency. They had maybe 1 hour before they would lose patience and force the evacuation at gunpoint. In that hour, they had to finish everything. Every charge had to be in place. Every trigger had to be ready. Watch the soldiers move in a perfect circle around the dome. She watched their movements. She watched how they stood. She watched how they responded to each new colonist that came out. Her military training, the years she had spent learning about tactics and strategy, came back to her now. They were strong, but they were also very structured. They moved in patterns. They followed exact orders. They did not improvise. If something happened that their instructions did not cover, they would wait for new orders from Pack 6. This was both their strength and their weakness. Gregory came to stand beside her. "How much longer?" he asked quietly. "Joseph says 30 minutes, replied. "The last charges are almost in place." "We cannot delay much longer," Gregory said. "Pack 6 is getting impatient. I can feel it even though it does not show emotions. Something about the way it is standing is different." As if responding to his words, Pack 6 moved. The massive crystal being stepped forward. It looked at the dome. It looked at the colonists who were still slowly gathering. Then it transmitted a new message. "Evacuation speed is unacceptable," Pack 6 said. "All humans will gather in the center dome immediately. No more delays. You have 10 minutes. Any human not gathered will be shot." This was different. This was serious. They were done being patient. Made a decision that would change everything. She stood up and looked at Gregory. She did not need to explain what she was thinking. He could see it in her face. She was going to risk everything. Walked to the center of the dome and then walked to the large transparent window that looked out at Pack 6. Every colonist watched her. The soldiers watched her. Pack 6's black eyes focused on her. "We understand," said clearly. "We are gathering now." She did not wait for a response. She turned to the colonists and her voice became hard and clear. "Everyone needs to move to the gathering point now," she said. "Quickly, do not run, but do not delay. Move now." The colonists understood that something had changed. Something in its voice told them that they should obey. They began moving toward the center of the dome where the equipment was. The soldiers watched them move. What the soldiers did not see was that had moved her hand in a specific way. The signal had been planned the night before. One colonist had seen it. That colonist then signaled another colonist. And that signal moved through the group like a silent message. In the tunnels below, Joseph Washington was watching the time. He had 5 minutes to finalize everything. His hands shook slightly as he entered the final commands into his portable computer. He checked each sequence. He made sure the timing was correct. If even one charge went off at the wrong time, the whole plan could fail. People could be hurt. The tunnel could collapse in the wrong direction. But Joseph trusted his calculations. He had designed these tunnels. He understood the rock formations better than anyone. He knew exactly what would happen when the charges went off. 4 minutes left. The colonists were gathering in the center of the dome now. Soldiers surrounded the dome, their weapons held ready. They were still calm, but there was something different about their stance, something that meant they would shoot if ordered. 3 minutes left. Pack 6 looked at the gathering colonists. Its black eyes moved across each face. It was counting them. It was calculating. It was determining if everyone had gathered. 2 minutes left. Held her daughter Emma's hand. Emma was here, she was safe, thought. She was with her mother. That was what mattered. If something happened in the next minutes, Emma was safe. But Emma was not in the dome. Emma was deep underground in a reinforced shelter, hidden away from danger. The girl who held his hand was actually one of the assistant teachers named Lisa, who was the same size as Emma and similar coloring. Had done this on purpose. If they were watching for her daughter, they would see what they expected to see. 1 minute left. Joseph Washington entered the final command. His finger hovered over the activate button. He said a prayer to whatever power might be listening. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about whether they would ever know what he had done here on this far world. He pressed the button. The charges activated in sequence exactly as planned. The first explosion was deep, kilometers below the surface. It was not loud, it was not violent, it was precise. It triggered a carefully calculated collapse in a section of tunnel that had been weakened over time by the mining operations. The second charge went off 10 seconds later, then the third, then the fourth. Each explosion caused a cascading effect. Each collapse triggered instability in the rock formations around it. Above the ground, the colonists felt the earth shake beneath their feet. The dome moved slightly. Some people lost their balance. Children screamed. Pack 6's sensors registered something was happening below ground. The leader immediately became very still. Its black eyes did not move, but something in its processing changed. The crystal being was receiving new information that did not fit its calculations. "What is occurring?" Pack 6 asked. Gregory Hayes answered immediately. "The mineral formations below are unstable," Gregory said, his voice steady. "Our previous mining operations left the rock fragile. The weight and equipment arrival has triggered secondary collapses. The whole area is becoming dangerous." Pack 6 did not respond. The leader stood motionless, processing this new information. A military occupation could not proceed if the ground was too unstable. Soldiers could be damaged. Equipment could be destroyed. The mining operation itself could become impossible. More tremors came. They were not violent. They were not destructive. But they were very real and very powerful. The colonists held on to each other as the floor moved beneath them. Pack 6's voice returned. "Geological survey required before continued operations," the leader said. "Military forces will withdraw to orbital positions. Evacuation is postponed. Colony will remain secured until geological status is determined." The soldiers began moving back to their ships. They did this smoothly and without emotion. They had new orders and they followed them exactly. There was no anger, no frustration, just the simple obedience of beings following their programming. Within 1 hour, all 5 ships had lifted off from the ground. They moved away from the colony and took positions in orbit above. They were still there, still watching, still ready to attack if ordered. But they were not attacking, not now. The colonists stood in the center dome and listened as the ships moved away. Some people cried. Some people hugged each other. Some people simply collapsed to the ground in relief. Made her way quickly to the tunnels. She had to get to Emma. She had to bring her daughter out of the underground shelter and back to safety. But Emma was fine. Emma was safe. Emma came running to her mother with tears streaming down her face, asking over and over if the crystal people were gone. "They are gone for now," said, holding her daughter close. "But we have work to do, sweetheart. We have to prepare for what comes next." Because knew something that they did not. Creatures of logic and calculation that would return. They would return with new plans and new strategies. They would return to take what they wanted. But the humans would be ready. The humans had proven something important, that even the smallest, most fragile creatures could stand against overwhelming power, that humans could adapt. that humans could think in ways that cold, crystal logic could not predict. The emergency council met in darkness. The colonists had turned off most of the lights in the dome to save power. The ships floated above in orbit, their dark shapes visible against the star-filled sky. Everyone knew that those ships were not gone. They were waiting. They were watching. Sat at the long metal table with Gregory, Joseph, and the other key people from the colony. They had perhaps 5 days before they would return with new equipment and new tactics. The ground instability had stopped them this time, but they would plan for that. They would bring tools to stabilize the minerals. They would bring more soldiers. They would return stronger. "We need to accept something," said, looking at each person. "We cannot fight them in a traditional military way. They are too strong, too numerous, too advanced. If we try to match their power with our power, we will lose." "So what do you suggest?" Gregory asked. "We do what humans have always done when facing something stronger," replied. "We adapt, we change, we use intelligence instead of strength." Joseph Washington leaned forward. "What does that mean in practice?" Pulled up maps on the computer. She showed them the colony's structure. She showed them the tunnels. She showed them the equipment they had. "We transform this colony into something they cannot predict," said. "We turn it into a maze. We use our equipment to create obstacles. We make every movement they make cost them something. Not in a direct fight, but through complications, through confusion, through making their orders harder to follow." Gregory was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the important question. "How many people die in this plan?" "I do not know," said truthfully. "This plan is risky, people might die, but if we do nothing, I know what happens. We are gone. The colony is taken. The minerals are extracted. And they'll learn that humans can be pushed around whenever they want. That lesson will apply to every human colony in this region." The room was quiet. "There is something else," continued. "Something they have never encountered, something that makes humans dangerous when we are cornered." "What is that?" asked Lisa, the assistant teacher. "Humans protect their children," said simply. "When our young are threatened, we do not think clearly anymore. We do not calculate odds. We simply fight. We refuse to accept defeat. That is the thing that they do not understand about us. When something matters enough to us, we become absolutely unreasonable." Emma was sitting in the back of the room, trying to understand the conversation. She was old enough to know that something dangerous was coming. She was not old enough to be truly afraid. For children, death was abstract. Loss was something that happened to other people. Emma simply knew that her mother was determined about something. Over the next 5 days, the colony transformed. The mining equipment was moved and repositioned. Every piece of machinery was configured to serve a new purpose. The engineers created devices that could trigger secondary collapses in specific tunnels. The technical team rerouted power systems and created electromagnetic pulses that could disrupt communications. Joseph led a team that built obstacles throughout the main dome. They created structures that looked like shelters, but were actually positioned to collapse in specific directions. They reinforced certain passages while deliberately weakening others. They created a three-dimensional puzzle that only the humans who lived there truly understood. The medical team, led by herself when she was not working on other preparations, studied physiology. They documented weaknesses. They analyzed how human technology might interact with biology. It was dark work, work that did not enjoy, but it was necessary work. The security team ran drills constantly. Every colonist trained in hand-to-hand combat. They practiced moving through the colony in organized groups. They practiced using the structure of the dome as protection. They practiced retreating into the tunnels and moving through passages where they could not follow easily. Emma participated in her own way. With her mother's permission, she moved through every section of the colony. She memorized every passage, every shortcut, every storage area. Because of her small size, she could access spaces that larger adults could not. She learned the colony so well that she could navigate it in complete darkness. At night, held her daughter and talked to her about what was coming. "People are scared," said. "It is okay to be scared, but being scared does not mean we give up. It just means we do what needs to be done anyway." Emma listened carefully. "Will you be scared, Mommy?" Emma asked. "Yes," said. "I will be very scared, but I will be less scared if I know that you are safe. That is what matters. Keeping you safe matters more than being scared." Emma thought about this. Then she asked, "What if the crystal people hurt you?" Closed her eyes. She wanted to lie to her daughter. She wanted to tell Emma that everything would be fine, that nothing bad would happen. But Emma deserved the truth. "Then you will remember that I chose to stand even though I was scared," said. "You will remember that I chose to fight instead of surrender, and you will remember that I loved you enough to do that." The night before the return, the colonists gathered one last time, stood in front of the group. Everyone was there, the old people, the young people, the children, everyone. "Tomorrow the return," said. "They will bring more ships and more soldiers. They will bring equipment to stabilize the ground. They will try to force us out or kill us. We cannot prevent that. We cannot stop them from trying." She paused, looking at each face. "But what we can do is refuse to surrender," continued. "What we can do is make it cost them something. What we can do is prove that humans do not break easily, that humans do not accept defeat just because the odds are bad. We are the children of ancestors who survived ice ages. We are the children of people who crossed oceans they could not see across. We are the children of survivors." Pointed to the window, where the ships were visible above in the darkness. "Those beings up there believe that power determines everything," said. "They believe that strength always wins. Tomorrow we are going to prove that belief wrong, not by matching their strength, but by refusing to break under it, by adapting when they are rigid, by being unpredictable when they expect predictability." "Are we going to fight them?" asked one of the younger colonists. "No," said. "We are going to do something worse. We are going to survive them. We are going to make them work so hard to take this colony that they will question whether it is worth the effort." Gregory Hayes stepped forward. "How many people are willing to stay and do this?" Every hand went up. Every person in the colony was willing. "Good," said. "Then we have one more night to prepare. Let us use it well. Tomorrow the honey badger bares its teeth." That night Emma slept holding her mother's hand. Did not sleep. She stayed awake, thinking about everything that could go wrong, thinking about the colonists who might be hurt, thinking about whether she was making the right choice by pushing them toward this impossible situation. But she also thought about something else. She thought about what would happen if they did nothing. She thought about her daughter growing up in a galaxy where humans were always pushed around, always made to surrender, always told that they were too weak to resist. Number would not allow that. If she had to stand alone against she would do it. The ships arrived at dawn. This time there were not 5 ships but 7. The crystal beings had brought reinforcements. They brought new equipment for stabilizing the minerals. They brought more soldiers. They brought determination. Pack 6 landed its command ship with precision. The other 6 vessels positioned themselves in strategic locations around the colony. The leader had learned from the previous encounter. The crystal beings would not be surprised this time. They would not allow the ground to cause problems again. The morning light was cold and gray. The colony's main dome looked small compared to the massive ships. Most of the colonists inside knew that this was the moment that would decide everything. Pack 6 transmitted a message directly to Gregory Hayes. "Evacuation will commence immediately," the empty voice said. "All humans will gather in designated locations for transport to orbital processing. Any human not at the gathering point within 15 minutes will be executed. This is not negotiable." Gregory looked at. They had discussed this moment many times. They both knew that this was the instant when everything changed. Everything they had prepared for was about to happen. "Colonists to positions," Gregory said into the communication system. Throughout the dome, people began to move. But they did not gather for evacuation. Instead, they moved to the positions they had trained for. The older colonists moved to reinforced sections. The younger, stronger colonists moved to the engineering stations. The technical team moved to the computer control areas. The security personnel moved to the defensive positions they had prepared. When 15 minutes passed, they found that no colonists were waiting for evacuation. Instead, the colony appeared to be mostly empty. The main dome was dark except for emergency lights. The colonists had vanished. This was not what the logic expected. Pack 6 ordered soldiers to enter the dome and search for the humans. The moment the first soldier stepped inside, Joseph Washington activated the first sequence. The lights came on in a strobe pattern, flashing rapidly. The pattern was designed to confuse crystal vision. The black eyes could see in many spectrums, but rapid light pulses created distortion in their sensory systems. The soldiers became disoriented. At the same time, electromagnetic pulses raced through the corridors. The communicators ceased to function. The soldiers could not contact Pack 6. They could not receive new orders. They could not coordinate with each other. Then the structure began to fall. The colonists had carefully weakened specific sections of the dome. When the right moment came, charges detonated. Metal beams collapsed. Walls fell, but the collapses were controlled. They did not destroy the dome. They blocked passages. They created obstacles. They forced the soldiers to navigate a path that humans had designed. They attempted to push forward anyway. They were strong. They moved the metal obstacles, but each obstacle they cleared revealed another. The tunnel network became a maze. The colonists, hidden throughout the structure, triggered secondary collapses and electromagnetic disturbances. Outside, Pack 6 received no information from the soldiers inside. The leader's orders could not reach the colonists. The ground beneath the command post was unstable due to the tunnel collapses happening below. The position was becoming chaotic. Moved through the corridors with a small group of colonists. They were not fighting directly. They were simply making movement impossible. They were triggering collapses, creating electromagnetic confusion, and using the structure of the colony itself as a weapon. A soldier emerged from the darkness ahead. The massive crystal being was much larger and much stronger than any human. In a fair fight, it would have destroyed and her group in seconds. But did not fight fair. She triggered a controlled collapse above the soldier. The metal beam fell with perfect precision. It did not hit the soldier directly, but it created a barrier. They had to navigate around the obstacle, adding another minute to its journey. Minute by minute, they paid a cost that they had not expected. Equipment was damaged. Soldiers were damaged. The operation was becoming increasingly difficult. After 8 hours, Pack 6 made contact with Gregory Hayes again. "What is your condition?" they asked. Gregory answered with a lie that was technically true. "The colony is in severe distress," Gregory said. "The structural damage is extensive. The mineral deposits below have become unstable. If operations continue, the entire geological formation could collapse. The minerals will become inaccessible." Pack 6 did not respond immediately. The leader's processing power was being used to calculate a new situation. The original plan no longer worked. The minerals that Pack 6 had come to extract were becoming less valuable if the geological formation was destroyed. There was another possibility Pack 6's logic considered. The humans could be negotiated with. The humans could be offered terms that would prevent further damage. The humans could be kept contained while they developed a new strategy. Pack 6 transmitted new orders. "All soldiers withdraw from colony," Pack 6 commanded. "Establish orbital blockade. All humans remain in colony under observation. Any attempt to escape will result in execution." The soldiers retreated from the dome. They had not won the battle, but they also had not been defeated. They had simply withdrawn. Gregory Hayes did not celebrate the partial victory. He knew what it meant. They were learning to adapt. The colony was now under siege. They were trapped. That night went to find Emma in the deep shelter. Her daughter ran to her, asking if it was over, held Emma and told her the difficult truth. "It is not over," said. "The crystal people are still here, but we showed them something important. We showed them that we do not break easily. We showed them that taking this colony will cost them more than they expected." "What happens now?" Emma asked. Looked at her daughter and made a decision that would change the course of the entire situation. "Now we do something they absolutely will not expect," said. The next morning requested a personal communication channel with Pack 6. The leader accepted. "This is Dr. Lewis," said. "I am the senior human representative on this colony. I have a proposal." "Speak," Pack 6 responded. "The colony is damaged," explained. "The mineral deposits are unstable. You cannot harvest them without risking catastrophic geological failure, but there is a solution. You take the mineral deposits from the southern continent, which are almost as valuable. The colony becomes a neutral scientific research outpost. Humans remain here peacefully. Both sides achieve their objectives." For nearly 10 minutes there was silence. Pack 6 was calculating the proposal. The logic was analyzing whether it was acceptable. "This proposal is logical," Pack 6 finally said. "The southern deposits are 87% as valuable as the colony deposits. Neutral status is granted. Mining operations will proceed on the southern continent. You will have 30 standard days to vacate this colony." But the negotiation had changed something important. They no longer saw humans as insignificant obstacles to be removed. They saw humans as beings capable of complex behavior, of negotiation, of creating consequences for hostile action. Over the next 30 days, the colonists did not evacuate. Instead, they repaired the dome. They strengthened the structure. They expanded the habitat. They sent messages to the Interstellar Coalition, telling the story of how they had forced a military force to negotiate. When the 30-day deadline approached, walked to the edge of the colony with Emma holding her hand. She looked out at the mining equipment on the southern continent. She looked up at the stars above. "Are we staying?" Emma asked. "We are staying," said. The Crystal people learned something important. They learned that humans, even small humans, even humans with no special weapons or technology, can stand against enemies much larger than themselves. They learned that when we are cornered, we do not break. We find new ways. We refuse to surrender. Knelt down and looked into her daughter's eyes. "Remember this," Emma said. "Remember that you are the child of a species that survived ice ages, a species that crossed oceans in wooden boats, a species that looked at the stars and decided to reach them, a species that does not give up. That is what it means to be human." Emma smiled and squeezed her mother's hand. In the sky above, the ships continued their mining operations on the southern continent. They would complete their work and leave. They would report to their superiors that the minerals had been successfully extracted. But they would also report something else. They would report that humans possessed a quality that calculations had not accounted for. Humans possessed the ability to refuse defeat. That knowledge would change how they approached human colonies. It would make them more cautious, more willing to negotiate, more aware that the humans they had always underestimated possessed strengths that crystal logic could not measure. The colony became famous throughout human space, not as a military victory, but as something far more important. It became proof that humans could stand against overwhelming odds. It became a symbol of human persistence and adaptation. Years later, when other human colonies faced threats, they would remember what happened on 442B. They would remember that a mother and her daughter and 40 other humans had chosen to fight instead of surrender. They would remember that even the smallest, most fragile creatures could teach the larger predators an important lesson. The lesson was simple and clear. When you corner a human, when you threaten the things humans love most, humans become absolutely unreasonable. Humans become willing to stand in the teeth of anything. Humans become dangerous. Emma grew up on 442B. She became a scientist like her mother. She studied the rocks and minerals of the colony that had become her home. She told the story of the day when the crystal soldiers came and the honey badger bared its teeth and growled. And every time she told that story, she looked out at the stars and understood something fundamental about her species. Humans were not the strongest creatures in the galaxy. Humans were not the most advanced. But when cornered, when desperate enough, when protecting something they loved, humans became something that no amount of crystal strength could defeat. That was the true strength of humanity. That was the power that would carry humans to the stars and beyond. That was the power of a mother who chose to stand instead of surrender. That was the power of the honey badger baring its teeth and refusing to be broken. But she would not be alone. 42 humans were about to prove that even the smallest creatures, when cornered and desperate enough, could teach the bigger predators that sometimes the cost of taking a meal was higher than they were willing to pay. Looked at her daughter and felt something powerful move inside her chest. The honey badger had grown its teeth. Now it was time to teach the crystal predators that some prey could fight back. Understood that now, sometimes the only power that mattered was the power to refuse to break, the power to look at something stronger and more dangerous and say no, the power to choose to fight even when you could lose. She looked at the soldiers and felt the honey badger wake up inside her. By dawn, 3 people knew about the beginning of a desperate strategy. Gregory knew, and a young engineer named Joseph Washington knew. They began to prepare for something nobody had ever tried before. They prepared to make a small human colony stand against one of the most powerful military forces in space. The ships continued their approach through space, unaware that the humans below were about to teach them a lesson they would never forget.